This is a walkthrough of Cartogram, Gramener's map offering. Cartogram allows you to color and resize maps of various countries and states and districts across the world. Right now this shows the world map. One can choose any other country. Let me pick Australia and go to a level 1 map, which has a map of Australia by state, or a level 2 map, which is a map of each of Australia's districts. Now these maps have a certain color which is based on the numeric value that's shown on the right side. For example, if I were to take Australia level 1 and choose a different value for each of these states, so for example I'm going to change all the values to 4. As I change the values, you'll notice the map getting recolored and the colors dynamically change. The values of the colors are based on the intensity of the color is based on the values that are typed on the right side. For example, if I type a value that is high, let us say 10 for South Australia, so that recolors South Australia to a relatively high value. So in this case South Australia has become green, and if I chose a value of a large negative value, let's say -5, then South Australia becomes red and all the other states recolor themselves accordingly. This is based on a palette that one can change. So if I were to, for example, put in values like this and choose a different color palette, there are a series of predefined palettes available. So if I choose a red, yellow, blue palette, that recolors according to the values on this scale. There are two kinds of palettes here. You have a diverging scale, so you have negative colors versus positive colors, or you have sequential scales where it goes from white to a certain color. So on a sequential scale of greens, for example, the highest colors would be dark and the lowest colors would be light. You can also reverse the palette scale, switching between the lightest colors and the darkest colors. You have an option of editing the data directly here, but you could also choose to copy paste this into Excel and edit the data. So for example, if the volume of data is relatively large, you could copy this entire data set. I'm going to select all using Control A and Control C to copy. Now I'm going to paste this data in Excel. Copy, paste, and this can be edited directly. So for example, I could choose to use Excel's lookup formulas. Let's do a simple check. We will color the states based on the length of the states. So I'll use the length formula to find out how many letters each of the state names have. Now I'm going to copy the first column and paste it back here, and you'll see a pattern that is based on the length of the states. So this is a state or district that has the longest name. Perhaps these are all districts that have relatively smaller names. So we find that Southeast Australia has relatively longer district names than most of the rest of the country. While editing, there are a couple of tools that make things easier for you. One is the ability to zoom in. So I could, for example, use the mouse wheel to zoom in into a particular area. I can hover over any area to see what that is. So for example, if I hover over this area, that's Midwestern Regional, this area is Dungog, and this area is Nambucca, and so on. If you click on these on the right side, that area is it automatically scrolls to the appropriate area. So for example, if I click on the Midwestern region, on the right side the Midwestern region is automatically highlighted. So if I just want to reduce the value here, I could change this quickly to, let's say, 10. That becomes lighter. Now let me edit this one. That should be made 10 as well. Let's pick this one. Let's make that 10 as well. So this makes it easy to edit from the map to the table. You can do the reverse as well. If I want to see where Oberon is, you could right click and select Find on Map. So that zooms into Oberon, or right click Find on Map. Another thing that you could do is select set of multiple areas. There are two ways in which you could do that. So you could, for example, say I'm looking for let's say Gloucester. You could search for GL OU, and that gives us Gloucester. You'll notice that when we started typing, it automatically started filtering. So if I start typing G, it highlights all the districts that have the letter G. GL does similarly, GLO. At this point, we've automatically narrowed down to Gloucester as the district. So multiple highlights are possible. There are other ways in which multiple highlights can happen. You could, for example, choose any one of the other data columns. This has information on the type of state, the state name, and so on. So if I want to highlight all of New South Wales, for example, we could right click on New South Wales, highlight similar, and just New South Wales gets selected. The same applies for any other area as well. So right click, highlight similar, that's Queensland. Right click, highlight similar, that's South Australia, and so on. These are all a way of coloring a map based on a set of palettes. You could also, however, choose to represent these maps in a very different way. For example, let me take India states. Now, on a state map, if one wanted to highlight the sizes of each of these shapes in a different way, for example, if I wanted the size of each of these states based on their population or some other number, then we have a couple of ways of resizing the data. The first is by choosing a stretch cartogram. What that does is resizes each of these shapes based on the size column. So, for example, if the value of Maharashtra were very high, let's say 20, then when we stretch, Maharashtra becomes a much larger state in contrast with, let us say, Madhya Pradesh, which is relatively smaller. Note that these resizings are approximate. It does not exactly size it in proportion. It does a best attempt at sizing it in proportion. That is because there are limitations to the extent by which physically contiguous maps can be resized. Another thing that one can do is resize them as circles. Let me take a different example. I'm going to use a red, yellow, green palette and switch over to a district map. Now, on a district map, you'll see that each of these districts are now sized based on a certain size value and colored as before. And if we were to, let's say, zoom in into Firozpur and change the size of Firozpur to 6, it's now recomputing, and Firozpur will now be a much larger circle than it was before. Let's pick another one. Let's zoom out, and if we change the value of Sirmaur to size being 20, that will again recompute the entire graph, and Sirmaur will have a much larger size than it did before. Notice that the position is based on a way of squeezing all of the circles into the map into the closest possible location, however ensuring that there is no overlap. So this does not guarantee that the positions will be accurate, just as the stretch map will not guarantee that the shapes are accurate. However, this allows you to represent two dimensions simultaneously. This data or these maps can be downloaded as either SVG images, which can be opened in any vector editing software, or as PNG images, which would work fine as raster displays and can be embedded into PowerPoint, or as raw data, which can be displayed in Excel. Hope that gives you a good overview of the map application. For any more queries, please feel free to visit the Gramener website at https://gramener.com.